right here, huh?
Can y'all hear me? Just give me, can you hear? Is the mic on? I just want to see. Oh, it's getting quiet. How is everyone feeling? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. How are you feeling? Oh, come on. One more time. I'm so excited to see everybody today. And I'm so excited to be closing out this extraordinary panel of artists, creative entrepreneurs, cultural tradition bearers, practitioners. And I am joined today by Penelope Oliver. Yes! Tiana Randall-Quant.
Yep.
Honey Mahogany. Kevin Dublin. And Sioux. Because, I want to say this first and foremost, that we are all people when we enter our spaces. We do things, and we have titles, and titles are important. But when we, as practitioners, enter the room, we bring our full selves, and we bring our full experiences. And so today, we're going to be talking a bit about what we all do up here and what it's been like over the past 3 years. And so I want to just kind of open things up. And I said this just as we were waiting in the wings, getting mic'd up, that we're going to have a dinner party. Because it's getting that time, it's cocktail hour. We're the last panel. So we're going to have a conversation about the things that we're incredibly passionate about. We're going to have a conversation about the things that make us tick, the things that we are living and breathing for. And so I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to start with Penelope, and we're going to go down the line, and then we're just going to go crazy. Do you like that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely.
So tell me, Penelope, what have you been up to for the past 3 years?
So for the past 3 years, 3 years ago I was 13, so just keep that in mind. I have been trying to drive change in my community, and from when you're young, when you're a youth, really the way to get involved is get involved with different organizations like Create California. And really identifying what issues your community is facing and where your place is in that. So I've been up to writing a lot of poetry because finding my voice in art and how that intersects with change making. In addition, just interning at different places, trying to learn all I can, expose myself, and really get to connect with amazing people like all of you.
And did you start an organization in the middle of a pandemic?
No, that was this year.
It's called
All Access Arts, and we hope to provide arts education in communities where they need it the most, marginalized communities, unhoused, communities disproportionately affected by racism, systemic violence. So we just started recently, still in the process, but we recruit community college volunteers along with other volunteers, bilingual volunteers, and go into the community, provide all the material, and provide arts lessons.
amazing. It's amazing. And Tiana, you've been doing some stuff?
Yeah, I've been doing some stuff. As a theater maker, the start of the pandemic, everything in my industry of Los Angeles theater making came to obviously a screaming halt. And it was this sort of existential void we were all staring in, when the future was so uncertain. But it also gave us the opportunity to sort of finally, because, being a theater maker in LA, it's, a lot of grinding, which isn't healthy, a lot of, multiple jobs at all these places and stuff like that. And it's being aware of change, but not having the capacity or the time or the resources to really stop and change things. And so the pandemic actually gave the LA theater community a chance to sort of stop and breathe and say, okay, one, how do we move forward from here? But also gave us the chance to reflect on, what have we been doing, and knowing that it wasn't working, but not having the resources or the capacity to address it in any way. And so, and especially after the uprisings of 2020, and it's hard for me to invoke the name of George Floyd because he was a person who should not have had to be tortured to death on live television in order for us to sort of stop and think. But that's what happened. We had a lot of theaters saying, we want to change, we want to create change, we want to not continue with the toxic practices that we were doing that we can't do under these circumstances anymore. And so, got together and created some, a list of standards and best practices for, equitable theater making, co-founded an organization about, holding theaters accountable to that change and stuff like that. And so that's what I had been up to over the past 3 years, because we had time to be on Zoom and to work on these things and stuff like that. And also dove a lot into Zoom theater and, got a chance to work with a lot of practitioners in areas that I'd never been to and, hadn't had the chance to travel to and work at and stuff like that. So
I want to just make sure I lift this up a little bit.
Okay.
Because that's my, you started BLKLST Los Angeles, which is an organization basically that created a set of best practices for LA theaters. And for those of you, how many people are from LA in here in this room? Okay, so we have some LA folks in the room. Now, for those of you that don't know, LA has the largest number of intimate theaters outside of New York. Like, we actually beat Chicago. We have more intimate theaters in Los Angeles, but those equitable practices within LA theater, not so great, right? And so you got busy and you were like, okay, we're gonna actually create a coalition to create new standards that theaters can adopt and begin to put into practice.
And just as a point of clarity, BLKLST didn't create the standards, although person-wise, there's a ton of crossover between the groups of the Los Angeles Anti-Racist Theater Standards, which is like a group of its own, and BLKLST, but BLKLST sort of holds theaters accountable to the standards, but we don't take complete responsibility for them because there's a lot of great people who also worked on them. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's what I've been going through.
Over a couple years. Honey, what have you been up to for the past 3 years?
Oh my gosh, last 3 years. Well, I just finished running for office. Supervisor in San Francisco. But I've been up to a lot of different things over the last few years, which really has been an extension of the work that I've been doing probably for the last 10 years, which is, I grew up in San Francisco. That's where I still am. I'm fighting to stay there, and I'm fighting to make it more equitable and, a better place for my community and all San Franciscans. We are going through a hard time right now, like many other cities, and specifically for queer people, people of color, trans people, artists. We are really struggling to keep our grip on our homes, on our small businesses that serve us, our safe spaces. And so, my work really, I'm a social worker by training, and I was really rooted in direct service practice for a long time. And then I really saw how politics and the political soup that we all swim in, and how that impacts everybody's day-to-day life. So I started getting involved in activism, joined local Democratic clubs, eventually ended up becoming the chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party. I still hold that title. That made me the first Black chair in San Francisco's history, and the first the first trans person to be chair of any. From my political activism came real deep work in the community. I established and was one of the co-founders and the first executive director of the Transgender Cultural District in San Francisco. We were really envisioning, again, as someone who's seen family members, friends pushed out of the city, really wanted to make sure that the Tenderloin, which has been for a long time a real safe haven for many of the world's misfits, whether it be queer and trans people over the decades, whether it be people who were relegated to sex work, whether it be people who were immigrants. The Tenderloin is really a melting pot and a safe space for so many of our most vulnerable communities. And so we wanted to honor that history, create that safe space, advocate for more affordable housing, but also make sure that when we create these safe spaces, and I think this will probably be a little bit of this conversation that we have here today, because when we, as artists, go into spaces, sometimes there's this idea of gentrification, right, and what the impact on local communities is. And we firmly believed that just because people are poor, just because we are struggling, does not mean that we can't have nice things, that does not mean that we can't have small businesses that we own, that we operate, does not mean that we cannot have access to services alongside access to arts and entertainment and have that be our home. So we created the Trans Cultural District. I also am a member of the Stud Collective. We are a group of 17 individuals who created a cooperative to save the Stud Bar in San Francisco from closure.
Thank you.
Well, we became the first cooperatively owned and operated LGBT nightlife venue in the country. Unfortunately, COVID did shut us down. We lost the space due to COVID, but the collective still exists, and we are actively looking at a new space right now, and we're waiting to sign papers on a new space right now. So that is another thing that I have been. Where is it? I cannot tell you that. That is highly classified information. But as soon as the paperwork is signed and we have, we'll probably be needing to do some fundraising, because the space that we're looking at is going to need a real build out to make it that iconic San Francisco drag bar that the Stud has always been. And then, in addition to all of that work, I've been working a lot in helping queer people get elected, helping progressive people get elected locally and throughout the state. And we worked really, really hard also in making sure that we were phone banking across the country, because in San Francisco, we do have a privilege of having, all Democrats in elected office, all progressives, all people who don't question trans people's humanity, all people who don't question a woman's right to choose, or people who have the capacity for pregnancy's right to choose what to do with their own bodies. And so we are, as we watch what's happening across the country, feel a real responsibility to use our voices and our privilege to be able to create change there. So we did phone banking into Wisconsin to get the judge elected there. Lots of different things. Oh, and then one thing that I'm really excited about that I'm also doing right now is I have this band. It's a new metal band called Commando. We are a little bit of a super group. People who know punk and hip hop might know. Tribe 8, so we have Lynn Breedlove from Tribe 8 who's in the band. Juba Kalamka from Deep Dick Collective is also in the band with me. From Los Angeles, we have Drew from Trap Girl, and we also have Krylon Superstar, who was, Krylon? Yeah, she's a superstar. And so we're all in this group together. We released an album during the pandemic. We are now currently signed to Kill Rock Stars. We just got back from South by Southwest. We've done a bunch of different things. So we're currently working on our new album, and we're playing at the Bandcamp headquarters in Oakland this week on Thursday. So if anyone here is from the Bay Area, there are still tickets available. Come check us out.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah.
What have you been up to? 3 years.
So, I mean, I guess it all starts at 3:26 a.m., March 13, 1987, Johnston Memorial Hospital in Springfield. I'm still, hectic. I was like, man, I got to think about these details. But let's go to the last 3 years. So the last 3 years it's been interesting because there have been so many shifts, and personally, so many shifts politically, so many shifts economically that have continuing to move, and the beginning of 3 years ago was this like, oh whoa, there's this level ground that's starting to come, whether that was actively getting back to, I'm a poet, so like writing dailies and generating lines and work each day. That was, doing the multiple job thing, but they were all things that were, a part of something that's, important. Like service learning has always been, it was a core part of education, it was a core part of, upbringing. And so it was like, oh, I'm working with elders in the community teaching creative writing through Liquid Foundation. It's like, oh, I'm in Oakland and Kickstart Coding, the small cooperative boot camp, which is like, okay, how can you make learning to code affordable, interesting, and do it in a way that really engages individuals in like, what do you really want to do and can be, helpful. And there was just like, oh, this is, stabilizing force. And it's like, okay, things are coming together. So like, how can, find a way, it was trying to get my, son to be, move and live with us full time. And then, March came, and it was, and things had started falling, just away. And there was a big scramble, and for months, and it was like, wow, the whole time I've been in San Francisco only 8 years, and the whole time I've been in D6. Like that's where it's like, oh, it's first in Tenderloin, and then now in Soma, and it was like, maybe I don't know if this can keep going, but it was remaining steadfast and applying and looking at opportunities and friends sending me things, and what became really just transformational during that period and created this huge shift was not only was I awarded SFAC, like arts, San Francisco Arts Council, like grant for finishing my collection, but you may have heard of guaranteed income, and guaranteed income pilots, and so there was a pilot for artists. Which we qualified for and applied to and received that as well, and it was like, whoa! Not only can I, live and remain here, but it really created this shift in terms of this mindset of abundance. Whereas I was feeling like, oh, maybe things before were kind of like stabilized. It was like things are stabilized. And of course, what do artists do? We feel stable. It's like, okay, how can I help other people? And so that work really came to thinking about creating space for other writers where they can, one, perform work, where they can, two, get paid to perform work, which is not always a thing, as we all know. And three, have conversations in community about things that are affecting us locally and everywhere else. And that was starting as just like the reading series, living room reading series and salon, as we like to joke. But then thinking about how can this become an incubator for helping writers in other ways, connecting to opportunities for grants, connecting to opportunities with 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 private partners who are like, hey, we're going to pay you and all the writers to come do an event here, and in this space.
So you basically went from a gig worker that got completely shut down because of COVID to thinking that you were going to have to leave your home, your city, your place, because where are you going to have an economy, right? To finding a way to access a universal basic income program that you were awarded that stabilized your financial outlook that you then reinvested back into your communities. You did that over 3 years. And it's happening. It's happening.
It goes on, We try.
We try. But I think the point that I wanted just to uplift, and we'll go to Sioux next, but that you could have just stopped there, right? Like many Jews just celebrated Passover, right? It could be enough. But no, you said no. You said no. There's more too. So I passed to Sioux. What have you been up to for the past 3 years?
Oh, man, you guys have been up to so much. It's a lot. I feel like I've just been working. You guys been working too, but I don't know if I've been working as much. I opened a business, so yeah.
Tell us about your business.
I opened a business. I just been grinding. So I came actually by way of sort of circle back around from San Francisco. Was there for the last about 8 to 10 years, getting a degree and living the art life. And I worked in the food and beverage industry, and so all those things just coupled each other, and they were the best. And when the pandemic hit, it affected all those things in that same way. And I had to pivot and make choices, which was good in my end, because I straddled maybe a fence a little bit more in my professional careers, being professionally involved in the food industry as well as a working artist and teaching and adjunct. And so maybe the slight push that I needed to say, hey, you can grind it and go ahead and do it. And so deciding to fully go in and do that, came back to what I refer to as home now, Sacramento for sure, after I sat here for a few in my 20s. And I came, I don't want to say with a chip on my shoulder, but with a bit of a heightened enlightenment of how some art programs may or be able to not work in conjunction with cities and themselves from living in what some refer to as a bubble, but a really great place that I lived in before. And when I came into SAC, I wanted to bring some of that knowledge, because as I started to look around to just find places to work within myself, I just wanted to make work. I was trying to line up stuff for a show. I was trying to line up a residency. The roadblock for me as a professional artist with 20 years of experience to just find a building to make my own work in was so great that I said, screw it, I'll just build it myself. So I just built it myself, and I opened a studio called Seed, which is a ceramic-based studio here in downtown. I definitely use clay, pottery, the idea of working with sculpture in 3D as a gateway to help more artists and people find creative workforce in the creative world. And so whether they come in because they wanted to practice something they saw on the Great Pottery Throwdown, they may leave as our social media manager and go off to their next best thing. And that's what we've been working on so far.
And when you say that you opened a pottery studio, but that you are kind of looking at it in terms of a workforce program, and I've heard you say, so I'll prompt you a little bit more to give a little bit more detail about how knowledge gets returned and the knowledge that may have been stolen or taken.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about kind of some of the ethos, because you didn't open a paint by pottery studio, although you could have done that, and you know that model, but.
Yeah, I think, so, at core root, the curriculum and the mantra in which Seed is developed in its education it can be a little heavy for some people in that way. And I think my training in food and beverage, I like to ease people in with a little amuse-bouche first, right? And come in. So come in for the pottery and stuff. But in the end, yes, what I'm trying to do is return knowledge that was from techniques driven specifically from indigenous communities. I don't know if we're aware of this, but clay exists all around the world. And those things exist indigenously for everybody all around the world. And through certain types of ways that we expand as humans, some better than others, a lot of that knowledge was taken from those original people, put into a book and set at a university upstairs where you have to be monitored to go watch that and pay a large sum of money. So my big thing is why can't I make a space that can now return that back to those people, and we can circumvent that sort of staircase if we can.
Yeah. Thank you. So I know that we're last panel, right? And I want to just applaud everybody in this room because you are all cultural practitioners in your own way, whether you work as an artist in materiality or policy or grant making or any of those things. But I really want to kind of pivot a little bit, and I want to almost do some group thinking. How many in this room, raise your hand if you're a self-identified artist? So just, if you have some level of practice, poetry, or, raise your hand if you, and I just want everybody here to see you, right? So look around the room. How many of you are self-identified policy wonks? Because I kind of go both ways. So we only have a couple policy wonks. Now that's really interesting. Now if you're not an artist and you're not a policy wonk, shout out what you are. Educator? Administrator?
I heard social worker.
Yeah.
Social worker?
Advocate.
Advocate?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to bring you into this dinner table party right here. So, if we had the governor's staff or your state representative or your federal representative in the audience, they might be there, we don't know, they didn't identify. What policy shift would need to happen so that your work could take a catalytic leap? Now, just think about that and I want you in this audience to think, what would that catalytic, what lever needs to shift, right? For your work to take a catalytic leap. Whoever's got a response to that, take it.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, we just got how many billions for that? More.
Yeah.
Right, I guess.
Say it.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny whenever who's an artist? I'm always like, ooh, give me like 90 seconds because I guarantee each and every one of you are artists in like some capacity, because anything that you take any time to learn and study, to practice, it's a craft. There's craft work involved in it, and how you approach it, make you an artist. And so a lot of times as artists, we do a lot of different things, right? It's like, oh, it's not like I'm, a writer, or I'm just a poet, or I'm just a musician, or I'm just, I just work with ceramics, because I work with a lot of different things. So the policy point, which, I would be like, where do we start with? Because I saw how transformative it was, for me. And outside of just its application to me, that has tapped me into just an entire world where it's happening all over, is a guaranteed income. And for many, many, many reasons, but one, if I would have like a selfish reason, is that when people have that foundational work, then that creates a space for them to be able to do all these things. This is not like an anomaly. Like like, oh, it's happening, you reinvest. Like that's like there were 160 recipients for the guaranteed income for artists in San Francisco, and probably like a fourth of those I've met, and we all share the same sort of stories in some capacity of this sort of reinvestment in community. And so if so many people have the ability to build dreams, because that's essentially like what starting to really create, then there's just a lot of other folks doing that, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Actually, I've done this and created that model. Maybe now there's a space for me to do other things, or have other space for other things. There's space for other people to do other things. Like all of our communities would be strengthened. So yeah, guaranteed income.
Guaranteed income is your one policy. Like that is, you would advocate for that.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I would. I mean, in general, I think a base level of some sort of comfort in just our way of life, just in a sustainable way of life. There are many programs that amongst different cities, San Francisco, LA, for different kinds of workers that do things. But I think the commonality across it all is, we're all 1099 for the most part if we're direct makers. And that specifically puts us in a category that we're not allowed to receive a lot of these other types of things. And why are those types of things set up in the blocked ways? There's soft controls that we don't have to necessarily ask for direct money, but passes on buses, things that will help us get healthcare at a base level of necessities. Like, these are types of very small things that can be done. I do recognize that we have healthcare problems for the mass majority of everybody, but to get basic things that will go a long way, like aspirin or Band-Aids or anything at the very base level, that's stuff that can be provided in a small way in programs. I mean, I'm not a politician, I can't make up these programs, I don't know how all the things work, but I'm pretty sure somewhere across there, a 1099 artist can be provided with maybe a first aid kit and some cough syrup or something, right? So if that's the base level, then where could we go from there at the least, right? And so if any kind of security could be happened, a pair of shoes, a buyback program, a matching program from the state that's invested from different types of entities, figuring it out is a lot of people's jobs, but we have to be on the same page to understand that we're not meeting base levels. And to do things like where we have just become, covering our bills, worked a lifetime as an artist to get there, and it is directly the turnaround for us to, hey, let me help somebody get it that much. If it meant 2 more years that you didn't have to deal with all of the bullshit or any of that. And why are we the ones that are directly determined to be the rungs that bring the next person up? Especially when we're the ones that are injected into communities or spaces that need life or need all these things. If we're that much of a value and an asset to citywide programs, then we need to be supported in those ways.
Tell me, what's on your mind? Who's percolating?
Oh, well, I mean, I am listening to what everyone is saying and just agreeing and realizing that really, we artists, we're human and we need the basics to get by. But I think that the reason that this is so pertinent to this community specifically is that today in America, if you're an artist, it has to be like, you can't do anything else. Like, you have to be crazy in a certain way because you are expected to sacrifice everything in order to be an artist. And there are very few other occupations that work quite that way. Mm-hmm. And, at the base of it, in this sort of capitalist, society and setup that we have, like, if people just paid artists well, then we'd be fine. But because artists are so passionate about what they do, because we feel like we have to do this thing and there's nothing else in the world that we'd rather be doing in that moment, the capitalism sort of takes advantage of that and says, okay, well, great, we can pay you nothing and you'll still do this because that's what you love to do. Mm-hmm. And so, because we live in that kind of a society, Now, just full disclosure, I am a policy, I've worked in government, I currently work in government, and so we write laws and write policies. And so we are now at this point where we are writing, how do we make up for that? So guaranteed income, right? That is a program, that's how we make up for that. I heard housing. Housing is such a huge issue because especially in places like San Francisco or really throughout California, housing is really unaffordable and we don't have enough of it and we need to build more of it. And if you are worried about housing, you can't, it makes it that much harder to work, to be an artist, to do all the other things. So looking at how we can, and I didn't realize this, but I was having a conversation with someone who's in the room who told me that artists are a protected class. And so can we build more artist housing? In places like San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles? Can we make it truly affordable for artists to live there? Because we all benefit from art. One of the things that I have loved to see develop over the years in San Francisco is that, we used to have all these really incredible murals in the Mission, and that was sort of like a cultural thing within the Mission district, which is, part of Calle 24, the Latino district in San Francisco. But we're now seeing those murals pop up all over San Francisco, especially in places like the Tenderloin and Soma and other parts of the city. And so clearly we have these artists that are creating a massive work that is having such an incredible impact on our city. We need to make sure that they can continue to live in our cities and that they can continue to not just survive, but thrive.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Can I have a quick interjection with one just quick thing?
Of course.
If there were one policy, really, it would be can we eradicate capitalism and work from there? That would be if there was just one thing, that would be, okay.
And let's talk a little bit about that, because if you want to eradicate capitalism, tell me more what that world would bring.
Ooh, I think that's really for everybody in this room to decide. Yeah. It's what kind of world do we want to create? Coming right back to the idea of the basic needs, right? And one of the things we do in the living room, it's there's this 10-minute break. Maybe sometimes 15, sometimes 20 if we're not keeping track of time. And it's a question. The very second one, it was around resources. And, I participate in the conversations too. And so the question was, what can we do in the Bay Area to ensure that everyone has enough resources? And it's an impossible question to answer in 15 minutes, right? And I jumped into this conversation with someone who was that's impossible. It could never happen. And I was why do you think that? Why do you think it would be impossible for someone to, not to be able to afford having a place to live, to be able to have access to healthcare, to be able to have, food to eat and access to work? And he was oh, actually, when you just put it like that, that does not sound that difficult.
Yeah.
And from then on, I was I have to do this always.
The current chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, did some really phenomenal work many years ago with the Kresge Foundation. She created this kind of Venn diagram around access to resources, right? Capital. You need access to resources and capital. You need systems of acknowledgement. And I think about kind of that framework that she created. We talked a little bit about resources. We talked a little bit about that access to capital, to space. But what about systems of acknowledgement? And I think I want to go to you two here, because I think in many ways, funding is a critical component. But I also want to go to this notion of being seen, being reflected by for your community and outside of your community, to be acknowledged and celebrated. And can you tell me a little bit about how you feel your work kind of flows into that as well?
So my hope is with each project we bring to communities is that the kids take that back. or the youth. We work with kids of all different ages, even adults. And they use that to drive change. That can be, it directly impacts civic engagement. Art is your voice. It is your power. It is your dream. It is your vision to change the world or to do anything you really want to do. It brings confidence. So my goal would be creating a space where we have leadership within, older kids teaching a lesson, where they're recognized for that, or a project that they can take back to their dorm room at a homeless shelter, or that they can take back to their family and say, look at what I created and look at what I'm capable of. Because at the end of the day, arts brings confidence. It makes you who you are.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and to speak specifically about like acknowledging, one of the quotes that my organization leans on, that Blacklist leans on, is a quote from Audre Lorde that the master's house you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And so, a lot of pushback that we encountered, a lot of obstacles that we encountered, in helping to draft the standards and in establishing Blacklist and in creating relationships with theaters, is that a lot of the leadership in these theaters didn't even understand what the master's tools were. And so having to then address that lack of education, and also because we were in an environment where previously a lot of the voices in leadership who had been leading this charge, the movement of like DEI and equity and stuff like that in LA theater had sort of started getting gentrified a little bit by people who were well-meaning, but who did not really understand the difference between performativity and actual sustainable change. And so having to get everyone on the same page to what even needed to be done in order to enact change, and why the ways in which the systems we had been operating under were antithetical to that. And it hurt a lot of people's feelings because they were the ones who had been complicit in those systems, and who had been upholding them and whose power was dependent on them. And so, part of the accountability, the foundation of accountability and transparency that we were trying to build this movement from, depended on an understanding of those tools of exclusion and gatekeeping and microaggressions and just basic overt and covert white supremacy that was that had infected the art space, and that was affecting arts workers of all races and was affecting the work that was being created. And so Blacklist, like our website, is basically we were inspired by Victor Hugo Green's the Green Book for Negro Travelers, which my grandparents used to cross this country, to travel across this country many times. So it was basically a catalog of theaters and tracking tracking where they were in their own journey of anti-racism, because, we acknowledge that everybody is on their own journey, and some were farther along than others, which creates a certain kind of safety, that is not present in, organizations that are at a farther, or who are not as far along in that journey. And so, addressing that and allowing artists to be informed before they go into a space, and creating informed choices about and giving them the agency to decide who they want to work for, and giving artists the chance to make the decision not to invest their creative labor into a place that is not ready to value them or is not ready to appreciate them. And so, when you say like systems of acknowledgement, like that in terms of accountability is like something foundational that Blacklist is trying to build from, so that we can all be on the same page and and do the same, so that all organizations have their own sort of unique strengths and stuff like that. But if they're not operating from a base knowledge of anti-racism and white supremacy, then, that work is always going to have to start over. They're not going to be able to get to that place because it's coming from a foundation that is shaky.
And in many ways, I mean, yeah, if we think about it and we look at the history of, the arts in this country, it actually is completely and totally rooted within a white supremacy framework, no? Right? So
Yes.
we can make that,
That's part of the acknowledgement, yeah.
right? It's part of the acknowledgement. And then each and every one of us are connected to one of those threads of the systems, right? Every single one of us. And one of us may be keeping that system moving, and one of us may be trying to insert and disrupt, or work within that system, or to take that system out altogether. And I think that's the piece where each and every one of you is absolutely extraordinary. That you and everyone in this room, are you trying, where are you at within your advocacy, right? What are you trying to build? What are you trying to change? What are you trying to shift? Right? We know the status quo is completely and totally unsustainable. We know the status quo has actually harmed generations, right? So what do we need in something that in the panel, I'm taking a moderator privilege at the moment, but at the breakout session earlier with Randy Engstrom and Hollis, what became really, really clear, one of my colleagues said, yeah, I think people are, I'm sensing, because I'm like, oh, we have had this cultural awakening, and we know that people are going to move on from it because the attention span is so small. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because it's not just on you, it is on us, right? To make sure that we don't let this be a moment in time, a 10-year cycle, but this is a 100-year cycle, this is a 200-year cycle, this is a 300-year cycle, right? That's a bit of an open-ended question, but I think we're getting close to the end of the panel, and I want to fire you up at our dinner table, because this is the end of the summit. So what needs to happen to make sure this is a 300-year reversal? Think big, bold, go.
Well, I want to invoke something that I had heard in a different town hall that dealt with that question. When the standards were launched and when Blacklist was launched, we had a town hall because a lot of leaders in LA theater were not happy about it and stuff like that. So we invited them into the space to talk to them more about it.
They weren't happy?
They were not happy about the standards or about Blacklist existing. We got called, we got called terrorists. We got called communists and McCarthyists in the same breath. Which, pick one. You can't call us the both. And so, but we invited them into this space to talk more about the standards, but also that hesitancy came from, a lot of these conversations had been, centering people who were afraid of being called racist or afraid of acknowledging the ways in which they were complicit in the system. And so recentering the people who had been excluded and who had been harmed and what they needed, that was part of the sustainability that we wanted in this foundation. And something that struck me was there's a theater in Los Angeles called Town Street Theater, and it's one of the longest running Black-centered theater companies in Los Angeles. And one of the artistic directors, Nancy Renee, the two artistic directors are two Nancys, and one of them, Nancy Renee, she was talking about, she said, we've had so many of these movements that have come so close and then fizzled out because of that. And she was like, because the standards are disrupting this power model, this is the first time that I feel in, the 40 years that she had been making theater, she was like, this is the first time that I feel like we can get over that hump, over that obstacle of fear, over that obstacle of having to always restart and re-educate. And so I think, a major recentering of whose voices are being centered in this conversation is integral to that sustainability and integral to that longevity.
We got to create that tipping point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, as far as the angle in which like Seed and the groups that I'm working with and stuff, it's, we really want to try to rewrite the arts education system as much as we can. I think that a lot of the times, things that keep us from moving forward in certain positions is just vocabulary. And if we can teach more people the vocabulary of the things and the way to move about that, then now we can see the true potential of the people behind that. And I think that, systematically, the way that, arts funding gets pulled from states and county things first, but yet is like one of the most expensive private educations that we can go for next to getting a med degree. In those ways, there is a huge gap between those two parts. And it, again, is always put on the creative or the creator and the maker to fill that gap. And so if I'm gonna keep filling that gap, I'm gonna do it the way that I do it. And then we're gonna reformulate it so that it is now in support of our systems and not in support of other people who are making millions of dollars as a dean of a private university.
Yeah, beautiful. I actually want to build on that. I mean, this is a great question because there's so many ways to attack this, and you actually have to use all of them in order to actually fix it. So it's hard to answer, but there's also like so many right answers to this. I personally think that education piece is really key, and this is also why the right is attacking education. Because if we can continue to teach and adjust our curriculums to reflect accurate history, to talk about things we've done wrong in the past so we do not repeat that history, and so that our children see that, hear that, understand that, and then say, oh, well, that's wrong and I need to be a part of fixing that. If we can take that out of the equation, then we can just keep doing things as, let's just keep going. Let's just keep on with capitalism the way that it is. Let's keep society the way that it is. Let the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and honestly dumber because they're not getting educated, right? It is a huge problem. I think that the other side of that is also that, and this is hard because government, I think, does need to take, in some ways, a bigger role. If we're looking to move away from capitalism, right, part of that is investing more in government so that government can, for example, do things like create social housing, right? I mean, we think about government-owned housing, we think of, we call them the projects, and we think of them as bad places or places that people don't want to live, places that are run down. But that is not, number one, that's not always true. Number two, it doesn't have to be true. We can have government-owned housing that is high quality, that is well-maintained, where people can live in, artists can live in, and be able to afford where they live. And that's, in order to do that, we need corporations to pay their fair share. We need the wealthy to pay their fair share. And every time someone says, make America great again, I'm like, yes, let's go back to when the corporate tax rate was at 40% and we didn't have billionaires because they were being taxed and that money was being redistributed for the good of the country. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes. All right, so I'm getting the wrap up from Terry that I see, because I know we're about done. So I want to just, if you have a quick thought, and then we'll let Penelope have the last word.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so much in everything. I guess if it was to distill it to a quick thing, I wish space for, it's going to require space for everyone. Space and partnerships, whether that is all about coalition building, which is like that's the thing that's going to create that giant momentum, but also on a very personal level, like having, supportive partners who you're able to have these conversations with, at home. There's so many times I can only say capitalism once a day, in our apartment.
Okay, well, now you said it.
There it is.
That's it. Penelope, last thoughts.
I would say the single most thing that we can do to drive change and make sure that this is lasting is take action. I created All Access Arts because I heard a lot of talk. I didn't see action, a lot of promises that weren't kept. Ultimately, it isn't just talk that kept things going in history. It was action. MLK, Silvio Rivera, Dolores Huerta, they marched so that we can run. So we really need to keep that in mind and just take action. It can be as simple as donating food. It can be as simple as spending a Saturday helping your new neighbors move in who are refugees. It can be as simple as you want it to be, but it's still making a difference because it's action. It's not talk. It's not unkept promises. It's action. So really just get out there, protest things that you don't believe in that are happening, and make sure that everyone has rights that they are destined to have and should always have.
With that, I want to say thank you to our esteemed panel. You are all extraordinary. Please give them a huge round of applause. Sioux, Kevin Dublin, Penny Malone, Tiana, Randall-Quant, and Penelope. Thank you so very much. And we are out. Julie Baker's back up to wrap up.
Yes. Yes, but I can't see, Tom, so I have to put my glasses on.
Try to get me on stage. How are you?
All I'm doing is saying thank you.
Danielle.
Thank you for being here.
I'm good.
Thank you for being present, for being engaged, for caring, for showing up, for all of the things that you contributed to making this day, I think, pretty special and wonderful.
We just want to thank again all the sponsors who helped make this day possible and help underwrite it so that it was more affordable. I know it's still pricey, a price point, but things have got a little more expensive since the pandemic. So thank you all for your commitment to being here. And we are now going to get to start our celebration in the lobby. So after we close here, we're going to invite you all into the lobby for some light refreshments. And then just a reminder to please join us at Party for the Arts from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Elks Lodge. I've heard it also called Elks Tower.
Elks Tower.
Elks Tower.
It's a tower. It's a really cool view of Sacramento. It's beautiful. We're going to have DJs and activations and fun stuff. And this is where we get to all dance together and let loose, because we need to do that.
And there are still tickets at the door. So if you don't have a ticket, there's no excuse not to come. Tickets are available at the door, $50. And I think this is the moment we wanted to...
Well, let me just say one more thing before we get to that. We just want one last activation prompt for you. We really appreciate those who have been participating in the word cloud. We'll be sending those to you afterwards. We'll send you all the photos that were taken in the photo booth, which has now been moved to the party. So if you're coming, now we're going to take pictures of you after several drinks. So, this should be even more fun. So the last activation is, what is one word to describe your major takeaway from today? So we hope that you'll do that. Again, you can scan it on the back on the QR code, and please do that so we can have these word clouds to capture everything that was happened today. And now what we want to do is invite
everyone who is a panelist, a presenter, or who's on staff, or who's a board member of either Create California or Californians for the Arts. We're going to ask you to please come on stage for a big, giant group finale photo. And I think on that note, Julie and I were just talking backstage that anyone in this room could have been on this stage today. And we hope we'll do it again, and we'll get more of you up here, because there's so many incredible people that have joined us today. So
please
if you, board members, staff, presenters, moderators. Come on, Maria Jensen. I see you.
Down here. You can come just right up here too. Come on, Leticia, board president, Californians for the Arts. Where's Victoria Hamilton?
Workshop
Fantastic.
presenters.
It takes a lot of people to make, Victoria, you can come right down here. Takes a lot of people to make an event like this happen. We're so grateful to each and every one of them.
So just another big round of applause.
Also to our ASL, to the team at Unseen Heroes. Where's Unseen Heroes? Unseen Heroes, amazing. The artists that created the backdrops, the activations, our photographers, Doug, and videographer, Gordon. It's Jerry up there, up in the, where's Terry? Terry, our stage manager, is backstage. We're only gonna hire theater people. We're only gonna hire people who come from the arts because we know they get shit done. Thank you, everyone. So we're getting this group photo, and then we're gonna go into the lobby, and then we hope you'll join us at the Elks Tower for Party for the Arts. And please join us tomorrow at the rally at 9 a.m. in Capitol Park between 12th and 13th Street on N Street. And then if you're coming to Advocacy Day, we'll have all your packets there. I promise we'll make it super easy for you, and you'll have some fun, and you'll get to talk about how inspired you were today and how important the arts are to your elected officials. So thank you so much.